But of course, Sweden had crime writers before Wervel and Voller, as well as between them and the present. For those readers interested in the development of crime fiction writing in Sweden and its current and possible future state, I offer the rest of this introduction as a fairly brief historical and critical overview, with a few personal attempts to explain the specific directions in which Swedish crime writing has developed. Crime fiction is a wide literary field, encompassing numerous very different kinds of stories. You have the classical stories of rational deduction, written by Edgar Allan Poe, and 50 years later by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, still later by Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, Ellery Queen, and so many others. You have the hard-boiled private eye stories of Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Mickey Spillane, Ross MacDonald, Walter Mosley, Sarah Paretsky, and Dennis Lehane. You have the psychological thrillers by such writers as Daphne du Maurier, Patricia Highsmith, and Ruth Rendell. An equally well-established category is the spy thriller, possibly created by W. Somerset Maugham, later with Ian Fleming and John le Carré as its most famous writers. But in Sweden, with so far only one major practitioner, Jan Guillou, whose 13 novels about Swedish secret agent Carl Hamilton have been immensely popular since 1986, but have so far had virtually no competition. For this reason, Jan Guillou and spy thrillers are excluded from the following discussion. You have most of noir literature, although my conviction is that noir is in fact defined emotionally, not by plot elements. Even so, most major noir writers, from Cornell Woolrich through David Goodis and Jim Thompson to Roxane Gay, do include crimes in their bleak stories of alienation and hopelessness. You have the many depictions of police at work, where the earliest notable writers were John Creasy and the unsurpassed Ed McBain. The serial killer thrillers, from Robert Bloch's Psycho to Barry Malzberg and Bill Pronzini's The Running of Beasts to Thomas Harris' The Silence of the Lambs, and innumerable later works. And we haven't even mentioned courtroom stories, financial thrillers, political thrillers. Most, if not all, of these various subgenres within the field of crime fiction initially appeared in either Great Britain or the United States. The detective story, the hard-boiled private eye story, the police procedural, and most of the other dominant kinds of crime fiction are initially Anglo-Saxon developments. But just like science fiction, another of the important literary traditions first established in the 19th century, crime fiction also quickly became popular in other countries and is today read and written throughout the world. In fact, not only today, but for quite a while. Sweden is a case in point. 40 years ago, American and British crime readers suddenly became aware of the existence of Swedish crime writing, when the 10 police procedural novels featuring Detective Inspector Martin Beck and written by Maj Wervel and Per Voller were translated and became bestsellers. They are still in print, and Henning Mankell achieved considerable recognition in English translations, so perhaps it is unreasonable to say that Sweden was again quickly forgotten, and remained so until only 6 years ago, when in 2008 the first novel in Stieg Larsson's Millennium Trilogy was translated as The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and became the next worldwide Swedish crime fiction bestseller. This time, however, the appeal of Stieg Larsson's talent and sales led to an increasing number of other Swedish crime authors being introduced in English translations, something that did not happen in the wake of Wervel and Voller's success. What virtually no one will remember is that if Stieg Larsson followed 40 years after Wervel and Voller, they had also followed 40 years after the first internationally successful Swedish crime writer, the pseudonymous Frank Heller, who enjoyed considerable popularity not only throughout Europe but also in the United States during the 1920s. But even if Frank Heller was the first Swedish writer of crime fiction to achieve success in translation, he was far from the first Swedish crime author.